Kristallnacht, we went to bed like two good Jewish, no, not Jewish, two little German boys. We would put to bed at a reasonable hour, I guess. Mm-hmm. During the night, we heard some yelling and screaming and glass break. Sure. My father and mother and I lived in the building where the business was. Okay, we went upstairs. We had a couple of floors up over the business at that point. And we heard this yelling and screaming. And my mother came into the bedroom and said, "Don't worry, your father will take care of everything." My father came in our bedroom and says, "Relax, here are the keys to the house, and here's the key for the safe." I don't know why or what, but, and then they were both taken by the Gestapo to the Gestapo headquarters. My father didn't come back for 8-10 weeks. My mother came back the next afternoon. The maid took care of us in the morning, and the two little boys were by themselves. That's Kristallnacht. We came out, we saw all this mess with the signs on the windows. It was the really second time that I knew there was something wrong. I mean, you're a boy, you're a kid. All these stories that people remember, I was a child. Maybe I was backward, I don't know. I was well treated, I was well taken care of by my parents until that day. I was spoiled, probably. Let me inject this, the first time I found anti-Semitism was at a schwimmbad, a pool, a swimming pool. We came, my brother and I, on our bicycles and drove, because it was a nice warm day. We used to be able to get 10-year-old kids used to be able to go. There was a sign on the door, Juden unerwünscht, Jews not wanted. We saw it, we were Jews, we turned around, we went. Aside, I spoke and told the story in the high school in Yena, and one little blonde girl turned around and says, "Mr. Friedman, Herr Friedman," whatever she said in German, "why did you turn around? You look just like the rest of us." And I was stuck for an answer. Still an answer. Why did I turn around? Why? Because the Friedmans were well known in town, and I don't know, we were smart enough to do that. Kristallnacht as such, my father came back, completely shaven head, totally depressed, about 30 pounds, 25, 30 pounds lighter.
What happened to him in the time he was gone?
While he was gone, he was beaten like all the others. They were mistreated at concentration camps. We could no longer go to school. That day I was called into the office of the principal, who was a friend of my father's, who said, "Karl-Heinz," that was my name, Karl-Heinz, "you'll have to go home. You cannot go to school anymore." And I said, "Why, wherefore?" "Well, that's the law. Your mother or your father will explain it to you." So after that, we stayed home for another 2 or 3 months until they found a place, the orphans' home in 93. Kristallnacht as such, my mother and the two boys moved into my grandparents' villa because the family pulled together. Mishpocha is the family. And while we were there, my uncle and aunt lived not far away. My uncle was taken away, my aunt moved in. It became a Juden house, a Jew house. And later on, I understand, after we left in 1941, many more Jews were stuffed into this house. Later on, they were taken down to rail cars and taken away. But Kristallnacht as such, I remember very well.
What did you see? What can you describe the scene?
It was the beginning of the Holocaust. Can I describe?
What, like when you...
The police were standing on the side who knew my family, because a town of 100,000 isn't, if you're a permanent citizen, who were unable to do anything because the uniformed SS and SR, Nazis as such, banging on the windows, breaking in. I did not have any bodily harm at that point. Neither did my mother. I don't think neither did my father at that point. But this was going on all over the town. There were 200 some odd Jews. There were maybe, I don't know, 30, 40 businesses, many retail businesses. Of course, they were totally destroyed. I saw them, but my mother still protected us even when my father was away. I was very lucky. I come back to that constantly.
Did they destroy your father's store?
Pardon?
Did they destroy your father's store?
My father, well, the offices were invaded. Destroy? Yes, all the windows were broken and everything. They were Kristall, means crystal, night. And it's because of the windows of crystal or water or glass were broken. And it was a Kristallnacht. It was all broken, yes.
You know,
I haven't talked this much about this in years. Every one of my family, other than my parents, myself, were deported. My grandmother at 70-something was deported to Theresienstadt, Teresen. My uncle and my aunt, and she died there. And the greatest, let's talk about my grandmothers. Lily and I went to Teresen and various other concentration camps, not to pay our respects, but in a way, yes. My grandmother, we found out, died of an illness, was dumped in the water there, and later on fished out and buried someplace. My uncles, my aunts, all were taken to Poland, to the various camps. My grandfather, who was at the concentration camp of Buchenwald, together with the rest of my male relatives, died shortly after due to a beating that he got in the concentration camp. Yes, they were only there for a couple of months right after Kristallnacht. My father and my grandfather were both veterans of the German army in the First World War. As I said, my father was an officer. That was the last time, the very last time, that it meant something good, or it did some good for them, other than over the years he was active in the that thing. I arrived on the last ship that reached these shores in August 19th, 1941, on a freighter that had 500, quote, passengers or refugees, whatever you want to call them.
from where?
We left Germany in July of 41, the last ones who had freedom to leave, and on a sealed train. Instead of the east, we went west, and we went to France, Barcelona, and boarded the ship in Barcelona 2 weeks later. The train from Berlin was sealed. There were 2 cars with about 40 people who were lucky enough to leave. It cost a lot of money. or bribery or whatever you want to call it. It wasn't easy. And it took 2 weeks to get to Barcelona. On the way, we were unable to wash or clean. We stayed in the train. And when we got to Paris, we found the local hires of local Jewish agency brought us bread aboard and told us, don't eat it all, because half of it you should give to the railroad workers, otherwise the train will stay, or the rail cars will stay here for a couple of weeks. It was occupied France at that time. We shared happily, and got as far as the border to Spain, and reached across the border in San Sebastian. The train opened, we stepped out, and felt freedom, even in Franco, Spain in those days. We were put in a hotel with white and clean sheets. We took a shower. We spent 2 nights in San Sebastian, got back on a train, spent 2 weeks in Barcelona, and that's the first time I learned to eat yellow rice, which is very popular here, and I love it today. And the amazing thing is that we did find passage on a Spanish ship, a Spanish freighter, as I indicated, 250 men approximately in the front, freight hall, and 250 other in the other hall, the women and children. We ate on deck, whatever we got. The sad, peculiar thing, my kid brother was able to leave with my parents and my brother. My brother developed 104 temperature as we were ready to board the ship. America at that time had a representative on the dock to okay that you had your papers for America. And, they wouldn't let a child with 104 temperature. However, we found a German Jewish doctor in Barcelona, because German Jews hold together no matter where they are, whether it's in Barcelona, Berlin, or New York, or throughout the world. And through some magic, we got aboard. We arrived in New York about 2.5 weeks later. We arrived at the Bush Terminal in Brooklyn. And of course, we came off the ship, ran out of food 2 days before we reached New York. My father, who knew some people to pick us up on the said, can you get anything for the boys to eat? And he was told by the other refugees who picked us up, who were here, ultra-Americans at that, of course, this is America, we have food. And they came 5 minutes later with 2 slices of bread, with a slice of ham in the middle for each of us. This white bread, Wonder Bread or whatever it was called, it tasted like steak, filet mignon, except I haven't eaten white bread ever since. I now toast it. That's the trip to America.